some disturbing video of a congressional hearing again tonight that you really need to see, because the most incompetent president in history has appointed the most incompetent cabinet in history. Today, it was Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson's turn to show what the Trump cabinet does not know.
Do you believe the substandard public housing conditions pose a risk to tenants' physical, mental, and emotional health?
You already know the answer to that.
Yes or no?
You know the answer.
Yes or no? I know the answer. Do you know the answer? Yes or no?
Reclaiming my time.
You don't get to do that.
Oh.
The time belongs to the gentle lady.
That was freshman Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts. Here is Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez of New York.
Secretary, do you know how many people are in the waiting list for public housing and Section 8 vouchers?
In your district, you mean?
No, nationwide.
There are hundreds of thousands.
No, there are 4.4 million people, by the way.
That's a number he should know. Secretary Carson's wild guess is that there are hundreds of thousands of people on the waiting list for public housing in America, but it's actually 4.4 million, 10 times more than he thought. He is supposed to be serving those people, but he does not even know that they exist. And then came freshman Congresswoman Katie Porter, and Secretary Carson literally did not know what she was talking about.
I'm not asking you about the interest rate, sir. I'm asking you about debenture interest curtailment penalties.
Explain.
So, all right, so FHA uses different servicing and conveyance procedures than the GSEs do. And the result of this is that the cost of servicing, mortgage servicing at FHA for a non-performing mortgage is 3 times the cost of doing the equivalent servicing at the GSEs for a non-performing loan. That tripling of cost in servicing, which then has the effect of reducing the credit availability to the American people, because when you drive up servicing costs, then servicers overlay with cost overlays, and it makes the loans more expensive for the very homeowners that FHA is designed to serve. So my question I'm trying to drive at here is, why is FHA, to use a term that I think we can both understand, lousy at servicing mortgages?
Okay, I have not had any discussions about that particular issue, but I will look it up, find out what's going on.
So as you look it up, I'd also like you to get back to me, if you don't mind, to explain the disparity in REO rates. Do you know what an REO is?
An Oreo?
No, not an Oreo, an REO, R-E-O.
Real estate?
What's the O stand for?
Organization?
Owned, real estate owned. That's what happens when a property goes to foreclosure.
Joining us now is Congresswoman Katie Porter, Democrat from California. Congresswoman Porter, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. What was it like to be speaking to the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and basically having to apparently teach him the elementary aspects of his job?
It was disappointing, and frankly, it was frustrating. Look, these are real people's lives that he is supposed to be improving through providing quality housing and affordable housing and FHA loans, and he doesn't understand. And in fact, he thought it was my job to teach him. You saw the clip where he told me to explain it to him, which I obliged him, but he also told me that I was welcome to come into HUD and explain everything to him and his staff. And this is not my job, it's his job, and I really wish he'd take it seriously for the sake of the American people.
Well, we had reports just within this week that he has illegally spent $8,000 on a dishwasher for his office, $40,000 in china and dishes and different things for a dining room at his office. And so that clearly demonstrates a real attention to things like that in his office. But I listened to a lot of the testimony throughout the hearing, not just his answers to you. I couldn't find anything that that the secretary actually knew anything about in what is his jurisdiction.
No, I think he literally gave zero competent answers today. I think this was, and there is competition for this, as you know.
Yes.
But I think this was the worst performance that I have certainly seen to date in financial services, and just incredibly disappointing. I mean, there are people who are facing foreclosure, people who are facing homelessness, people who are on wait lists for low-income housing. I represent Orange County, California, and we have a real affordable housing crisis in coastal California. And our HUD secretary has made very clear that the only details he cares about are the details that affect his life, the price and functioning of the $8,000 dishwasher.
What should the HUD secretary be doing for your district?
The HUD secretary should be addressing the affordable housing issues that we're facing. So I spent over a decade studying families in foreclosure, and even in a strong economy like this, even with low rates of unemployment, some families are still going to get in trouble. They're going to become disabled. They're going to fall behind on their mortgage loans. He should be making sure that when families fall behind, that his agency, FHA, is doing its job of assisting borrowers and helping them get back on their feet to stay in the houses if they can, and if those houses do have to go to foreclosure, making sure that he's minimizing the losses to the taxpayers and to the banks and ultimately to the American borrowers and public that FHA is supposed to serve.
Congresswoman Katie Porter, you did it again today. You certainly take full advantage of your 5 minutes in those hearings, and we're really grateful that you came to join us again tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And when we come back, a former Housing and Urban Development Secretary and presidential candidate, Julian Castro, will join us with his reaction to what he saw in that hearing room today. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development today, again, refusing to answer a question from Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley.
Yes or no? If left unaddressed, do you believe the substandard public housing conditions pose a risk to tenants' physical, mental, and emotional health? If left unaddressed.
Yes or no? Can you ask me some questions yourself?
You don't get to dictate what my line of questioning is, reclaiming my time.
Joining our discussion now, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Julian Castro. He is also a former mayor of San Antonio, Texas, and he is now a Democratic candidate for president. And Secretary Castro, I want to first of all just speak to you in your former capacity as a Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and get your reaction to what we saw in that hearing today and what it means for the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Well, this is a classic case of, it would be funny if it weren't so sad, because as you pointed out, and Representative Katie Porter and others pointed out today, there are 4.4 million people who are waiting for housing assistance, who are not being served, who need it. At the same time, the Trump administration has proposed over a 16% cut to HUD's budget that already is only serving 1 out of every 4 Americans who qualify for housing assistance. And on top of that, you add the performance that we saw today, which is really a window into the fact that Secretary Carson, 2.5 years into his term, doesn't have any kind of command over some of the basic things about HUD. And, the picture that it paints is an administration that doesn't care. Leadership at the agency that's not committed to the mission, or at least not committed enough to even try to understand it. And so, we can't change this administration out soon enough when it comes to meeting the housing needs of Americans out there.
You said today that as president, you will appoint judges who unequivocally recognize the precedent set by Roe versus Wade, and a cabinet that's entirely pro-choice. For example, what difference would it make if the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development is pro-choice?
Well, I think it's about folks who have progressive values. And we did a whole bunch of things to work with, for instance, the Department of Health and Human Services on the link between health care and housing. We expanded things like the Equal Access Rule, which afforded protections to the LGBTQ community. So all of that is to say that there are a lot of intersections that happen between the work that HUD does, the work that Health and Human Services does, the work that a whole bunch of agencies do that isn't directly obvious from their name. And I believe that we ought to appoint people who have progressive values, including to stand up and defend a woman's right to choose, which is clearly under attack from what we've seen lately in Alabama, in Missouri, in Georgia.
I want to get your view as a presidential candidate of our lead story of the night, which is now what is becoming a developing story within the House of Representatives of every day, almost every hour now. Another Democrat coming out saying that the Democrat supports moving straight to impeachment. The leadership isn't there yet. Where are you on impeachment?
I said very early on, Lawrence, that I think that this president should be impeached. The Mueller report, as you know and your audience knows, listed 10 different instances where the president either obstructed justice or tried to obstruct justice. And Congress has said, the leadership has said that they're going to subpoena Bob Mueller, that they're going to do further inquiry. Obviously, the administration is stonewalling the committees on information that it needs to do that inquiry. But at the end of the day, I think what they're going to get back to is those 10 instances that Mueller pointed out. And on top of that, you add the stonewalling. I believe that this president should be impeached and that it's a mistake not to move forward with impeachment. And I imagine that some folks think that it might be a political error to go forward and try and impeach the president because it's going to go over to the Senate and probably Mitch McConnell will just let it die. And so he may not actually get removed from office. But at the same time, I believe that the message that you send if you don't impeach this president is that he has a clean bill of health. And when election time comes, that nothing was wrong. He's going to say, you know what? If there had been a problem, don't you think that these folks would have impeached me? And when they didn't because I didn't do anything wrong, and they even knew that I didn't do anything wrong. And that couldn't be further from the truth. They need to stand up for the rule of law and show the American people that nobody, including and really especially the President of the United States, nobody is above the law.
I want to change the subject to an urgent issue in immigration, but we also have a commercial break structure to deal with here. Can you stay with us across a commercial break?
Sure.
That way we won't be interrupted. It'll be our